Hi friends, so today we'll be moving to the sixth module. The topic is concurrency, and this is a short video which covers all the topics in the module. Okay. Hi friends, so today first we will start with what concurrency is. Actually, a program is said to be concurrent if it has more than one active execution context. Okay, so if a program does have more than one active execution context, then we can say that it's concurrent. We have already learned concurrency in database. Okay, now again in operating system we already dealt with synchronization, so I'm not going deep on synchronization. Synchronization controls the order of operations occurring in different threads. Okay, now synchronization is implemented by spinning and blocking. We will go through the topic later. So anyway, the synchronization is implemented using spinning and blocking. Okay. Okay, so when we move to the concurrency in depth, we can see that the concurrency is provided in three different types. Okay, in languages, the concurrency is provided in three different types. The first thing, the language itself impart concurrency. The second one, there is some compiler extensions which can be joined, which can be added so that it provides concurrency. The other one is the external libraries. Okay, so here we can see some examples. For the first, when we go for the concurrent languages, Algol, SID and Ada are examples for concurrent language. And likewise, OpenMP is a library that is used in Fortran to implement concurrency. Okay, and usually the concurrent program is better than a library support. So if you need to go for concurrency, then it will be better if you go for the Algol, SID or Ada languages. Okay, thank you. Now we will deal with thread architecture. Okay, when we deal with thread architecture, actually the first architecture that came into the mind is like one process and one thread. Okay, you know what a thread is. Thread is a lightweight process, or it can take a definition like it is the alternative form of schedulable unit of computation to the traditional process. Anyway, you all know what a thread is. Okay, so in this architecture, first it was like one process, one thread. So every process will be having just one thread. Only one thread will be there in the process. But in this architecture, the problem is that why we are introducing a concept like thread. That concept or the relevant of thread, we can say that it is not using the accurate meaning of the thread. Okay, so this option was ruled out. Then there was a thought like there was an extreme thinking like one process will be there in the system, and all the threads will be, if there are n threads, then all the threads will be mapped to this process. Okay, so there will be only single process and n thread. So that was the second architecture that came into the mind of the scientist. Then what happens is that when one of the thread goes for a system call, then the process need to get stopped. Okay, if one thread need to go for the system call, the process need to get stopped. So that also was ruled out, because for a system call, when a system call comes, the whole process need to get stopped. Okay, so nothing will get executed. So after that, there came an architecture. So after came this architecture where there is n process and m threads. Okay, n process and n threads. Like means a process can have any number of threads. Likewise, there will be n processes. Okay, the processor can have m number of threads or any number of threads, and there will be a lot of processors, so that these two problems will get resolved. Okay, so they will get a concept of thread is implemented even if one thread go for a system call, only one process will go for system call. So the problem in the second implementation also gets resolved. Okay, so we are using the architecture like n process n thread architecture. Okay, so after thread architecture, we'll be going for thread creation. This is a very important topic, thread creation. Okay, all the concurrent system allows thread to be created dynamically. So and there are 6 options to create thread dynamically. The first one is co-begin, second one is parallel loop, third one is longet elaboration, fourth one is fork or join, then implicit receipt and early reply. Okay, so these are the 6 options in which you can just create a thread. Okay, so first one is co-begin, and the specialty of co-begin is that whatever the statements that are written in co-begin will execute concurrently. Okay, so here you can see that you are writing co-begin and this is an end. So here we can see that there are end statements and these end statements will get executed concurrently. Okay, so each co-begin can have a sequential, parallel, or commonly a subroutine code. It's possible to write sequential statements, parallel statements, or subroutine calls. Okay, and it is used in Argon 16. Okay, so that is co-begin. Here, this is another example of co-begin. In co-begin, you can see that. So co-begin, this is a start and this is an end. Okay, so you can see that the first statement is a subroutine call. Okay, P A B C. So that is a subroutine call, and you can after that you can just see that there is a begin and end. Okay, and here so that is the second one. Second statement is written inside begin and end, and here this is the third statement. Okay, so this is the third statement. So here you can see that in co-begin all the statements, so there are how many statements are here? That is 1 2 3. Three statements will be executed concurrently. Three statements will be executed concurrently. Okay, that means this subroutine, this is another subroutine, so the second subroutine, and this what we say which all it is written inside this begin and end. Since it is written in begin and end, that is a sequential set of statements. Okay, so this is a sequential set of statement and this is a subroutine and this is another subroutine. So all these three will be executed parallelly, so concurrently. Okay, so PAB, that is a subroutine. It will be executed in one side. Concurrently, the steps in the begin and end will get executed one by one. Concurrently, the subroutine S, which is the third one, will get executed concurrently. So all these three will get executed concurrently. So if you need to write some statements that need to get executed sequentially inside co-begin, you can just start it with begin and end. If you write something inside begin and end, then you can see that it will get executed sequentially inside a co-begin. I hope it is clear. So next is our OMP directives. OMP directives are the external libraries that are used in C to impart concurrency or to create threads. Okay, actually we are creating threads for imparting concurrency. That's why we are creating threads. So OpenMP is an directive, external directive. Since it is similar to co-begin, we are including this in the co-begin section. Okay, so for OpenMP directives, it executes as co-begin. In co-begin, you can see that instead of writing co-begin, we are writing pragma OMP sections, and here we start and here we end. And in co-begin, each statements are executed, or each statements are thread, or we can say that each statements can execute concurrently. Likewise, here we can say that each section will be a thread, or we can say that each section can execute concurrently. Okay, so pragma OMP section. So this is the first section, and this is a pragma OMP section. This is the second section. So whatever written in the first section and whatever written in the second section will execute concurrently. Okay, this is similar to writing some begin end here and begin end here in alcohol 68. Okay, similar to that. That is, whatever written in this will get sequentially, but this will be executing. This whole thread will be executed in concurrently with the second thread. I hope it is clear. So that is a co-begin. The second one is the parallel loops. The specialty of parallel loops is like all the iterations will be executed parallelly. Okay, all the iterations will be executed parallelly. So we'll be using OMP. Okay, external library OMP for that, and we'll be writing like pragma OMP parallel for int I equal to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus, and you can just say that all the iterations will be executed concurrently, or all the iterations will be creating a thread. For example, I'll just give out another example so that you can understand. So I'll be writing like similar to this step, like hash pragma OMP for 4, and I am writing for int I equal to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus, and inside this, if I am writing like a of I, if I am writing like this, a of I. Okay, and think that a of I is a function which do have a lot of steps. Okay, many steps. So a is a function which has many steps. So inside this for loop, I am writing a of I. So what happens? Actually, all the iterations will be executed concurrently, or all the iterations will be giving the creating a thread. All the iterations will be creating a thread. So listen here. So if I am writing like this, the first iteration will create, or first iteration will call a of 0. Sorry, this is function. So a of I. Let it be so. A of I. Okay. So the first function called is a of 0. So the program will execute a of 0. Then the next iteration is a of I. A of I, that is a of 1. So a of 1 will get executed. So a of 0 and a of 1 will get executed concurrently. Like next iteration is a of 2. So a of 0, a of 1 and a of 2, all these threads will get executed concurrently. Actually, you are creating a thread with value with I value 0. The same set of lines is executed, which is the another thread with the value of I as 1, and you can see that there is another thread created, and the thread with value of I as 2. Okay, so actually you are creating 3 threads to execute concurrently. I hope it is clear. Likewise, we can also use this parallel fh library in .NET. In .NET, we will be using parallel fh library, and you can just write the same like parallel.for 0, 3, I. And if you write something here, all the lines that are written. Okay, so all the iterations will be executed concurrently. I hope it is clear. So that is parallel loops. Okay, next one is longit elaboration. In the parallel loops, we already learned that each iteration or each iteration will create a thread, or we can say that each iteration the statements will be executed concurrently. Likewise, in longit elaboration, the speciality is that there will be a procedure which doesn't have a parameter. So it is a parameterless procedure. And this parameterless procedure, another specialty is that it will be of recursive type. That means that procedure will be called in the same procedure. Okay, and in longit elaboration, this procedure, when it is called of recursively, each recursive call will create a thread, or we can say that each recursive call will be executed concurrently. Okay, each recursive call will be executed concurrently. So we can say that there are parameter plus procedure. That means there are no parameters in the procedure, and this procedure is also a recursive this procedure do have a recursive call. Okay, recursive procedure, that is the procedure calls itself, and each recursive call generates a thread. Each recursive call generates a thread. We can say that each recursive call will be executed concurrently. Okay, in ADA we can use this longet elaboration, and this is an example for longet elaboration. Okay, so each recursive call just creates a thread, that is longet elaboration. Now we'll deal with the next topic, that is fork or join. You already know about fork or join. Fork is used to create thread, and the join is used to wait for the completion of all the previously created thread. Okay, so fork and join is a keywords which is used to create a thread. Okay, fork or join is used to create thread. Okay, so you can impart concurrency in the programming language. Now just go through what is the difference between fork and join and other thread creation mechanisms. So other thread creation mechanism, let it be co-begin, or let it be a parallel loop, or let it be longet elaboration. Okay, whatever it may be, the speciality of these is that they will be having a common starting point and common ending point. Which is a common starting point? If I am going for co-begin, where co-begin, the first statement, so where the co-begin starts is a starting point, and the end of the co-begin, in which all the statements are executed. All the statements are executed, either it may be concurrently or sequentially, whatever. So if there is 5 statements, 1 2 3 4 5, all the 5 statements, or all the 5 concurrent threads will be executed, and after this concurrent thread executed, the co-begin end. In parallel loop we can see that each iteration gives creation of a thread. That means the first iteration will be the first thread, second iteration will be the second thread, third iteration, fourth iteration, fifth iteration. So all will be different threads, and all the threads will be having a common starting point and a common ending point. All the threads will be having common starting point and common ending point. Okay, but it is not the case of fork or join. So co-begin, parallel loops, longet elaboration will be having common starting point and common ending point. But for fork and join, we can say that as we call the fork keyword, a thread is created. We can create a thread randomly whenever we require. Okay, so all the threads are created randomly. It doesn't have any common starting point. And also, as the thread gets finished, it will stop. So that they also doesn't have a common ending point. So they won't be having a common starting point or common ending point. That is the difference between fork and join and other thread creation mechanisms. When we'll be using join, so that we will wait for the completion of all the threads. Okay, but even if we wait for the completion of all the threads, we'll be having different ending time of the threads. Okay, so that is the difference between fork or join or all other thread creation mechanisms. I'm not explaining fork and join much because you already know. Okay, so we'll move to the next topic. Before going to the next topic, let's see some examples. Here, this is how in Java thread is created. You will be using extends to inherit from thread class, and you will be executing our code to be running by the thread will be returning run. Okay, and this is how you will be creating an object. Okay, this is how you will be creating an object. So you all know, you have already done lab in Java. Okay, so we'll move to the next language, and this is another language in Modula. We'll be creating a thread like this, t equal to fork of c, and we'll be using join as join of t. So this is how you will be using in Modula. And in Ada there is no explicit keyword like for conjoin, but it's actually working like for conjoin. Okay, so task and here, and we will be creating an object access t equal to new t. Okay, so just you need to just understand that this for conjoin is used in Java, Modula, and Ada. Okay, so you already know Java. Better to learn one example more. That is, you can also learn Modula. That's all. Okay, this is another example of thread creation. This is in C sharp. In C sharp, we will be just writing as the class. Okay, so you will be writing a class, no inheritance, nothing. And what we will be doing is you will be creating an object of that class, rend object. Okay, rend obj is the object of this class. And to create a thread, you will be writing thread, and you will be giving a name, and you will be writing new thread. And whatever, if if this function foo function is having the steps that need to be executed uh, as a thread, then we will be just writing new thread start, and inside the function you will be writing red object dot foo. Here foo is the function in which the statements that need to be executed as thread is stored. Okay, so this is how a thread is created in C#. This is similar to for conjoin concept. Okay, so for conjoin we can see that Java is there, Modula is there, and also in C# we are using for conjoin. Okay, next one is the implicit receipt. In implicit receipt, it is actually like an RPC, that is remote procedure call. And what happens in such in RPC, actual thread is in server while the client will be initializing the thread. Okay, so the request is given by the client and the thread is actually created inside the server system. Okay, so what happens when a request comes in, that is from the client, a new thread is created to handle the request. Okay, and the server system binds a communication channel to a local thread body or subroutine. And the bind operation allows client to perform fork in server address spaces. Okay, so in RPC, the main advantage is that the client will give the request, and for each request to serve the request, a thread is created in the server, and that is how implicit receipt happens. Okay. Okay, next one is early reply. In early reply, we can say that the threads are created when functions are called. Okay, that functions need not be recursive function as like longit elaboration. In longit elaboration, the function's call is recursive, and each recursive call gives birth to or creates a thread. But here in early reply, a function call will create a thread. Okay, how it is called, how it's actually working. Listen here, let there be a function called a, and a, inside a we are calling another function b. Okay, so a is a function, and inside that function we are calling a function b. So what happens in normal scenario? First a will be executed, so a is here, then b is here. So first the steps in the a will get executed. When it comes for the calling of b, it will jump to b, then the steps of b will get executed. After executing this b, what happens? The return, after the return, a will get executed. This is how in normal procedure this will get executed. This is how the function call will get executed. Okay, but in early reply there is a difference. The difference is that the same scenario, if I'm writing a, b, okay, first a will get executed. Okay, then what happens? Then b is called, and as the b start executing, what happens is that it will just return a value. Okay, it will just return a value, and this value is returned before the B get executed. Okay, before finishing the execution of B, a value is returned. After that, A gets executed, and concurrently B also will get executed. I hope it is clear. Okay, so first A get executed, then when the function B is called, the procedure goes to B, and B, what does is, before finishing the execution, it will return a value so that A can resume its execution, and concurrently B also will get executed. Okay, so here we can say that caller waits the callee to execute, but in normal case, caller waits the callee to execute, and after that only caller will get executed. But in early reply, callee returns a value before before it finishes the execution, and after the reply, both the caller and callee executes concurrently. I hope it is clear. So this is early reply. So in early reply, all the function calls creates a thread, and it will get executed concurrently. Next topic is synchronization. Synchronization just means how the threads in concurrent environment works, or how they can be synchronized together to work. Okay. Now, in synchronization, the first thing is busy wait synchronization. In busy wait synchronization, what we do is you will be checking the value of some variable, so that only if the condition is true, the process or the thread will get executed. Okay, so let it be like x equal to 0 for a resource which is not being used. So if x equal to 0, a thread can access the resource, and x equal to 1 is set, like a mutual exclusion we say. If x equal to 1, then that means that a thread is using the resource, and the other threads need to wait. Okay, so let it be the condition. So in busy wait synchronization, first what we do is, actually we'll be dealing with the spin lock. So this is, we call it as spin lock. Okay, so here actually what we do is, first when a thread comes, and if it checks for a resource, the resource is available. Since x equal to 0, the resource is available. So what it do, it will set. First it will check, or we can say that first it will test. If the value is tested and the value is 0, then the resource can be accessed, and it is set to 1. The variable is set to 1. After the execution gets over, after the thread get executed, value is set back to x equal to 0, so that other threads can use. Okay, so this is a normal behavior. Now there is a problem. There is a chance for some problem to occur. For example, if I say that there are two threads, T1 and T2, comes to access the resource. So it will check the condition of the x. So here we can see that the value of x is 0. So what happens? T1 is the first one which comes to access x. So x equal to 0. So it can get the resource. Okay. The next step is T1 need to set x, right? X equal to 1, so that no other thread comes and gets the resource. But what if T2, the second thread, comes and check for the value of x before T1 set it to 1. Okay, before T1 setting the value of x equal to 1, another thread is coming. The thread is T2, and it checks the value. So what happens? It also finds that x equal to 0. So after that, thread T1 will set x equal to 1, and also thread T2 will set x equal to 1. Since it has changed the value from, it has set the value to 1, T1 and T2 will try to access the resource together, which will take into a problem. So now we're gonna deal with how we can solve this problem. Okay, to solve the problem, we'll be taking another technique called test and set. Okay, actually the name is test and set, but what we're gonna do is set and test. So what happens, what we do is, actually you know that when the thread T1 comes, and if the value of h equal to 0, what it do? First it will check whether h equal to 0. After that it will set the value. Okay, in this procedure first it will set. Okay, so initially before checking h equal to value 0, what it does is it will set the value of h is 1. Okay, it will set the value of h as 1. Then what happens? It will compare the value of h to the older value. The older value was 0 and the current value is 1. So first it set the value of x as 1, then it will compare it with the older value, and it will check whether any change has occurred. If change has occurred, this T1 can take the resource. If the change doesn't occur, it cannot take the resource. I hope it is clear. Okay, so before checking, it will set the value of x as 1, and it will compare the value of h to the current value of h to the previous value of h. Okay, so it sets the boolean value as true and returns an indication whether the variable was previously false. If it was false and it became true, then T1 is the one who belongs to or who did it. So T1 can access the resource. While if T2 comes by that way, and it will set the value of x equal to 1, but initially before T2 come, T1 was already set the value of x is 1. So when we compare the previous state and the current state, there is no change. So T2 cannot access the value of x. Okay, so this is how that problem can be solved. Okay, so there is a disadvantage for test and set. In test and set, the problem is that when T1 comes, first initially the value of h is 0. T1 comes, it will set h as 1, then it will compare it with the older value. And T2 comes, then what happens? It will set the value of h equal to 1, and it will compare to the older value. Older value also h equal to 1. So T2 will not be getting the resource. So it will wait. And again, it will check until it get that resource. The T2 keep on checking it. Okay, so T2 again comes, again set the value, again compare it with the older value. Okay, so there is no change. So until and unless this T1 releases this resource, T2 comes and doing the test and set operation. Okay, so that will increase the amount of communication. Each time a thread comes and checking, it will first set the value, then testing value, writing and reading. 2 operations for one checking. Okay, that will increase the communication. So we have to reduce it. For that, we are going for the next one, that is test and set. Okay, in this, initially you know that T1 is holding the value, so the value of h equal to 1. So when T2 comes, it will test and set. As usual, test and set. What happens? It will set the value as 1 and it will compare the value. And since the value hasn't changed, what happens? It will wait. T2 will wait. Okay, then it spins and again it will come. Okay, and anyway, the T2 for the thread to execute, it needs that resource. So again it will come. When it come in the second spin, first spin it does that test and set. Okay, but in the second spin, what happens is it will not go for test and set, but it will be going for testing only. That means in the second spin, when T2 comes again to check the value of x equal to 1, it need not set. It will not set. It will just check whether the lock is available or not. Okay, so in the first spin only, the T2 will be setting, then it will be checking it with the previous value. That is, the test set operation will get executed. In the second step, that means when the T2 comes again for the same resource, it will not go for test and set, but it will just check. That means it will go only for testing. It will test whether the variable is available or not. Okay, so by that you can just only for the first communication there will be two operations. For the second communication it will be only one operation, so we can reduce the operation a lot. Reduce the communication of the operation a lot. Okay, likewise there is another called back off. In back off what happens is the time delay or time, a fixed amount of time t2 will be asked to wait until it comes for next string. Okay, so back off is actually a one thread. If one thread is failed to occur lock, then it need to wait for a fixed amount of time. It is required to wait for some time before going for the next spin. Okay, I hope it is clear. And this is a procedure. Actually, lock is the variable that is used. And first it will test and set. After set and test and set, if it is not available, then it will just go for testing only. No setting will be done. I hope it is clear. Okay. The problem of such locks is that some of the resources, some of the threads will get more time to execute, while the other threads will not be getting enough time. Okay, for example, T1, T2, T3 be three threads. The T1 will be executed about 250 steps. T2 will be executed 200 steps. Sometimes T3 will not have started. It will be just waiting for the resources to get. Okay, so it is possible. So to reduce such problems, we will be using something called barrier. Actually, barrier is a checkpoint. Okay, so we will be setting some checkpoints. And in this checkpoint, that means sometimes it can be the number of steps that are executed for each thread, such thing. Okay, so there will be a specific checkpoint. So first checkpoint, what it does is it will make all the threads which has already covered the checkpoint to wait until all other threads which are not yet reached the checkpoint reach the checkpoint. Okay, that is, the thread is made to stop at a point until all the thread reach this point. Okay, so you know that T1 and T2 are well ahead. So let it be like 250 steps be the checkpoint. So T1 is already executed 250 steps, so it will be waiting. Then T2 will be reaching 250 steps, and T3 will be reaching 250 steps. Only after all the threads reaching this checkpoint, again T1, T2, T3 will be executed. Till then T1 and T2 will be made to wait until T3 pop-ups. Okay, so that is called barrier. So using barrier, the thread is made to stop at a point until all the threads reach this point. It uses shared counter variable initialized with a value n. Okay, here n is 3. That n is number of threads. Okay, so when first thread reaches the checkpoint, it will reduce by 1. When the second thread reaches the checkpoint, it will again get decremented by 1. Sorry, so it will be 1. And when all the threads have reached the checkpoint, the value of this counter will be 0, so that it can restart. All the threads can restart. Okay, so that is why we are using a variable like n, which is a counter actually. As the thread reaches the barrier, that thread is made to wait and value of the counter is decremented. When counter is 0, that means all the thread has reached the barrier, then the value of counter I is changed, the value of counter is changed to n, and the same process will get continued. All the threads will get executed until it will reach the next checkpoint. I hope it is clear. That is called barrier. Next we deal with non-blocking algorithms. Okay, non-blocking algorithms example is will be using CAS. CAS means compare and swap. Compare and swap. Okay, so what actually do is we won't be blocking any threads. We'll be making that threads execute. Okay, and here we can see that in non-blocking algorithms we also will not be using any locks. We won't be using any locks, so there is no locks and no blocking. Okay, this is how non-blocking algorithms work. And here we can see that this is the first one, which is a blocking algorithm. Okay, it is not a non-blocking algorithm. This is an example for ordinary algorithm, in which what we do is we will acquire the value of L. Okay, L is the lock here and H is the resource. Okay, so H is the variable whose value is used. So H is the resource and L is the lock. So when you acquire a lock, you can use the value of H. We are copying the value of H to R1, and you are using some function, let it be foo, whatever may be, some functions is executed by that thread, and what happens, the resultant value is written to R2, which is a next register, and the value of the register is copied to X. Okay, so a change is made in X. So this is how ordinary algorithm works. Clear? Only if the lock is occurred, this all steps will execute. If lock is not occurred, we'll keep on checking with the lock. Okay. Now next one is we can say that CAS. In CAS, what happens is there is no lock. You can see that there are no locks here. Okay. So what happens? It will actually take the value of H. So H will be copied to R1. H will be copied to R1. And you know that this R1 will be taken to function where that is required, and that function will get executed, and the resultant R2 will be taken. R2 will be the result. Okay, here also you got the result R2. After that, here you are writing R2 to X. Here you are, instead of writing R2 to X, you are just comparing and swapping. What are you doing? It is based on the condition that if the value of X is changed from the initial value. Okay, initial value here, when the thread has started, the initial value is stored in R1. Okay, so if the value of R1 and the current value of X, so this is the previous value of X that is stored in R1. When the thread started, the value of X was that of R1, right? X equal to R1. R1 equal to X, so the value of X is copied to R1. So this is the initial value of X, and here the current value of X is compared. So the initial value and the current value of X is compared. If the initial value of the X and current value of the X are same, it is taken as there is no other thread which changed the value of X, right? There are no other thread which has changed the value of X. If R1 and X are not same, that means some thread has changed the value of X, or some other thread is using X. So instead of locking system, this is comparing the current value of X and the previous value of X to understand whether any thread is using the value or the variable X. Okay. Here you have to understand that H is a variable, or H can be taken as a resource. In the previous cases, we called H as a lock. Instead of that, here we are using L. Okay, L is the lock. H is a resource. In the previous example, I have told that H is a lock. H equal to 0, H equal to 1. That is a lock. Here it is a resource. It is a normal variable which can hold any value. So it will compare the current value of H and the previous value of H. It is a variable. If the value has changed, then what it means, some other thread has already came and changed the value of X. That means some other thread is using X. If it is not, means if there is no change, that means the value of X, current value and the initial value are same. If it is so, then the new value R2 will be copied to X. That is compare and swap. Okay, compare and swap. So what happens? If there is no change, that means no other thread is using the variable X, then the final value will be copied to X. So there is a comparison, there is a copy. So that is why it is called as compare and swap. Okay, so compare and swap. If and this will result a Boolean value. Okay, this will result a Boolean value. If this is true, then it means this copying has done, the thread can finish its work. If it is not true, that means it need to redo all the steps. Okay, actually it is not blocking any thread, it is making the thread work, but it will just checking whether some of the variables is used or not. If it is used, then it will again redo the work. Okay, it is not blocking, it will make the thread, instead of waiting, it makes the thread again do it again. Okay, so this is a generalized CU, that means it will be repeating. Okay, and here it will be checking until that CAS gets success. Until this gets success, it will get repeated. Until this CAS gets success, it will get repeated. So this is just a generalization how it works. Okay, so CAS until the condition gets okay, it will repeat. If it is get success, then the thread is finished. I hope it is clear. So this is CAS, and that's all about synchronization. I hope you understand. If you have any doubt, just please ask. Okay, so I have made it as short as possible. Please go through. Thank you.